Hi, everybody. Since the president of Tunisia state Kais Said's dramatic move on July 25, there had been, like a foreign policy review said, a great debate over whether it was a coup by a power hungry president or an example of resolute leadership by a former constitutional scholar. In fact, during the day of 25 of July, there had been an uprising of Tunisian people all the day long throughout the country, especially in deep Tunisian regions and near the young people. A violent revolt against the locals of another party. People were angry, revolting against the poverty, exclusion, corruption, and privilege of the parties and even the government led by another coalition. So, President Kais Saied appeals to be responding to the will of the people to protect their country and democracy from an anti-reform parliament headed by political Islamists who envision an Islamic State as a vehicle that will re-implement Sharia or Islamic law and thus restore global leadership and sovereignty to Muslims, as if the Tunisians were apostates and heretics who must be Islamized by force. Another pretends it's a coup, cioè o golpe, or coup d'etat. The party another expected at first a strong resolution from Western countries, especially the United States of America, to condemn the change Kais Saied did at the summit of the state on 25th of July. But there had been, instead of this, a moderate preoccupation about the stability of Tunisia, its democratic process, and its institutions. Kais Saied froze the parliament and took urgency measures as previewed by the Article 80 of the Constitution. He dismissed the government and promised the appointment of a new prime minister shortly. These emergency measures are planned for one renewable month. Now, with the latest developments in Afghanistan, another expects international support from the Fundamentalist International, which includes, as all people know, ISIS, Daesh, Al Qaeda, the Muslim Brotherhood, Hizb ut Tahrir, and even Boko Haram. But another and its allies do not understand two essential facts. The first is that with President Joe Biden, the United States renews itself with the Monroe Doctrine, whose foundation is a withdrawal into oneself with America to the Americans as its main slogan. It also means, in a true cynical way, Afghanistan to the Taliban, Russia to the Russians, and China to the Chinese. At this level, there is even a little bit of multilateralism. The second fundamental fact is that, as after the First and Second World Wars, and especially after the global COVID-19 pandemic, humanity needs a new glorious 30, synonymous with trade, exchange, increased tourism and travel, art, creations, and leisure. In other words, political Islam is over. It's no longer a constant choice as after the eruption of the said Arab Spring in 2011. Tunisia's stability, even with a strong man, matters a lot in international relations and diplomacy at the time of reconstruction with its juicy construct in Libya. Rashid Ghannouchi, the president of another party, is pathetic. He does not want to admit that the game is over for him and for his sect, especially since the real problem is not between Ghannouchi and Kais Saied, but rather between another and the Tunisian people. When Kais Saied hammers and claims, as he increasingly does, that there will be no turning back, he resolutely knows what he's talking about. In fact, according to the latest polls, 94% of Tunisians support his action. If he retreats or changes his mind, it is a real political suicide for him. There had been a toxic and funest overdose of Islamism in Tunisia. The game is over and it's finished. Rashid Ghannouchi must remember what Winston Churchill once said: "You wanted to avoid war at the cost of dishonor. You have dishonor, and you will have war."